It's Christmas Day 1878, and a young boy is born in Switzerland, which they name Louis Chevrolet. Louis had 6 brothers and sisters, and his father was a man named Joseph Chevrolet. Just like many Swiss men back then, Joseph was also a watchmaker, and he would work very hard so his family could eat. Unfortunately, life was extremely hard for Joseph's family, and the only kid that would understand his father's struggle and try to help him was Louis Chevrolet. He would hang by him just to learn how watchmaking works so he can help out. Joseph had a hard life. He had 7 children, and him and his wife made 9 people. And feeding that many people is extremely difficult. Since Louis was the only one that understood the struggle, he decided to quit school at 11 years old to get a job and help out his family. Louis Chevrolet gets a job at a bike shop, and he very quickly picks it up on how these bicycles work, in a way where he could find junk all around the shop and build his own bicycle. With the help of these junk parts, he had created a bike that was much faster than any other bike in his town. So he would always challenge the kids at his old school to come and race and make some money. But of course, he knew he was going to win because he was the fastest, and he would hustle these little kids. It would get to a point where every day after school, the kids with their bicycle would line up in an uncrowded area so they can race bicycles and bet on who's faster. And you know damn well Louis Chevrolet was always in first place. It got to a point where Louis Chevrolet winning races was generating more money than his parents. And that's when he slowly got well known around the city. At this time, there was an American staying near Louis that had a steam tricycle that was having some trouble. And he was looking for a type of mechanic that knew how these tricycles work so he can fix it. That's when one of the kids asked Louis if he can fix these bicycles. Louis says, absolutely, I can fix anything. Let's see what the problem is. The steam tricycle that Louis saw made him go crazy because he had never seen such a machine. He had never seen a tricycle that would move under its own power and it didn't need pedals. These were the very first cars basically. Steam tricycles or steam bicycles. The owner of the tricycle was someone important, William Kissam Vanderbilt, one of the sons of Cornelius Vanderbilt. One of the men that basically built America in terms of railroad, and you could compare his wealth to Rockefeller. When Vanderbilt sees Louis as a little kid that has so much knowledge about these bicycles and tricycles, he tells him, why are you wasting your life here? You should be in America, where people like you will be very successful. But Louis was still a kid and he couldn't make that decision just yet, but he would dream about going to America. The story continues and we get to the year 1899 when Louis is 21 years old. Since Louis was a fanatic in mechanical things, he would read everything about steam engines and bicycles and tricycles, and he wanted to collect the maximum information about these things. Since he wanted to go to a huge city to continue his career, he decided to move to Paris. When the mechanics over there realized that this little kid knows what he's talking about and what he's doing, they quickly hire him as a mechanic. This is the first time he gets familiar with the gasoline engine. When he sees a gasoline engine, his idea of engine completely changes, and he believed that gasoline engine is millions of times better than a steam engine. It didn't take very long for him to save some money to move to the US. He wasn't even in Paris for a year, and he got into a boat ride and went to New York City. When Louis finally gets to the United States, unfortunately he loses his father in Switzerland, and this is when he decides to tell his entire family to try to move to the United States because life is much better and easier here. Louis continues to get a job all around the US being a mechanic, and he finally lands a job in Fiat. When Fiat realizes that Louis Chevrolet is very knowledgeable, they send him to the Fiat race team to continue designing race cars. He becomes very successful in that area. Not only was he a master mechanic, but he was a fantastic driver. He shows himself in the many races he raced, and he broke record after record. In a way, you could consider Louis Chevrolet the greatest driver in the 1900s. You can't compare driving back then to driving today, because it's much easier now. Back then, the drivers would basically wrestle with the car. Nothing had help. Everything was mechanical. Even the brakes, it was the power of your foot that stopped it. So you had to have insane strength to control a car like this. Chevrolet continues to break records until he meets a man named John Walter Christie, and he requests Chevrolet to move to Philadelphia to build race cars for him. Since the income was much higher than the Fiat job, Louis Chevrolet accepted and moved to Philadelphia. It doesn't take very long before he starts designing different cars, and it's good to know that Louis Chevrolet designed the very first front-wheel drive car right here. While he was designing different types of cars, he was also a race car driver, and he would race everywhere in the US. At this time, there was zero safety in these cars, and there was a high chance that when a race car driver participates and they get in a car crash, they would die. That's how dangerous it was. If you've seen our video about Bugatti, Ettore Bugatti lost his son Jean Bugatti just like this. But this is a few decades after Louis Chevrolet. Louis Chevrolet got in many accidents, but he didn't die because that's how tough he was. But unfortunately, when he turned 30, he had body pain everywhere, and he had to keep going to the doctor for neck pain, back pain, and leg pain. While Louis Chevrolet continues to go to the doctors and building race cars, he meets a man named William C. Durant. He is one of the founders of General Motors. William suggests to Louis to become one of the race car drivers for their Buick racing team. Since the pay was better, Louis Chevrolet accepted. Not only did William love the way Louis drove the car, he also loved his name, and he thought it was a beautiful name for a car. That's when he suggested to Louis that we should start a car company and put your last name on the company, Chevrolet Motor Company. Louis accepted and said, "My brother has to be under the company, Arthur Chevrolet." In the year 1911, Chevrolet Motor Company started. They separated the workload like this. Louis and Arthur would work on the engineering and design of the cars, and William Durant was the investor and the marketing manager. 1 year later, the first Chevrolet is built, the Chevy Classic 6, which later on the name was changed to Chevrolet Type C. This was pretty revolutionary because it was a very lightweight car, but it had a 4.8-liter 6-cylinder under the hood, and it was extremely powerful for 1911. This power allowed the car to reach 110 kilometers an hour. When this car reached sales, they put an extremely high price on it, $2250, which is about $65,000 in today's money. But the Type C wasn't a normal vehicle. This vehicle was considered a luxurious vehicle, and the reason for that was that it had high quality material and a powerful engine. But since Chevrolet was a very new company and they weren't well known and it was an expensive car, they only sold 500 of them. William Durant was not a fan of this type of vehicle that doesn't have a lot of buyers, and he told Louis to create a cheaper car, a car that everybody could buy. Louis denied that offer and told him if they want to buy a cheap car, go buy a Henry Ford Model T. And at that time, a Model T cost around $800. But William kept telling Louis, with this type of car building, we're not going to make any money. Louis would give a negative answer and say, we will only build luxurious and cool cars, not normal cars. After this fat argument they had with one another, he decides to tell William Durant that he wants to go to Switzerland to visit his family back then, and he needs about a couple months off. He goes to Switzerland, visits his family, and comes back to the United States. But he comes back to a company that's unlike anything he left a couple months back. William Durant has changed everything about Chevrolet Motor Company, and this was all without speaking or the permission of Chevrolet. Once again, they had an argument with one another. After all the argument, Louis Chevrolet tells William Durant, "I sold you my name and design, but I'll never sell my personality." That's why he quits working for Chevrolet. He gets back to the only thing he loves, designing race cars. We get to the year 1915, and Louis Chevrolet probably makes one of the biggest mistakes in his life. He decides to sell his share in the Chevrolet Motor Company for dirt cheap. And this is at a time that Chevrolet is not worth a lot. William Durant was the owner of General Motors, and he wasn't worried about Chevrolet Motor Company as much as the other manufacturing companies. So Chevrolet was just standing still, not being worked on. But either way, he sold his name and company to William Durant. And when William Durant owned most of the company now, he decided to execute what he wanted to do all along. Cheap, affordable cars. But what did Louis do? With the little amount of money he got from Durant, he started his own company named the Frontenac Motor Company, which he designs and builds race engines. At this time, you could say Louis Chevrolet was building one of the greatest race cars in the world. But when you get to the year 1922, Gaston Chevrolet, Louis' little brother, gets into a race car accident and dies. The only person that was feeling extremely guilty was Louis Chevrolet. He hated himself that he let his little brother get behind that wheel, and he felt like it was his fault that his little brother died. That's when he promised himself that he will never build race cars ever again, and he exclusively built engine for different manufacturers. But when you go forward, we're reaching the 1930s. The Great Depression is about to hit, and a lot of companies will go out of business. And one of those companies was Louis engine building business. But the thing is, William Durant had been running Chevrolet very well, because when you get to the 1930s, for the very first time, Chevrolet Motor Company is outselling Ford Motor Company, the #1 company in the world at that time. So you could say Chevy Motor Company was a huge success. But Louis Chevrolet himself, that had his name on the company, is bankrupt. After the Great Depression, Louis Chevrolet's age has been hitting him hard, and he doesn't have the motivation to start another company. That's why he went to Detroit to his own company that started it and asked for a job. The people in charge didn't even realize that this is the man that started it all, and his name is on the company. So they gave him a normal job in the assembly line. He couldn't work for a few months because he was suffering with a sickness that had been bothering him for many years. And when he went to the doctor, they said they had to amputate his leg to make him survive, because if they don't, he will die. After the amputation, Louis cannot work anymore, and he has no type of income from anything. He only lasts for 3 more years, and in the year 1941, at the age of 63, he passes away. His brother Arthur gets extremely depressed on what he is confronted with, and 2 years later, he commits suicide. On the other side, Chevrolet is becoming a worldwide brand, and every country is buying it. In the year 1953, the iconic Chevrolet Corvette is released, the first American sports car. Chevrolet Impala, the most sold car in the world and the most sold car in 1 year in the US. Chevrolet Impala is the only car that sold more than 1 million in 1 year. This was the story of Louis Chevrolet, the founder of probably one of the most famous companies in the entire world. A life that started off well, continued to be well, but ended tragically.